Good evening. Welcome back to 630 Point of View. Tonight in the Hot Box, Governor Jack Dalrymple kicked off the legislative session with his State of the State address. Governor Dalrymple, thanks for joining me tonight. I want to start here, Governor. Let's take us out past the legislative session. So we've gone through the legislative session. You look back on it. What has to happen for you to say, you know what, that was a successful legislative session?
Well, I guess if they would just pass my budget out the way it is, I would consider that successful. But knowing that that's not really reality, I think basically, Chris, we've laid out a good blueprint for them. I would hope that they would work around some of the details, work on some of the fine points. But I think they're going to realize that they're going to have a hard time finding a good consensus unless they, pay attention to the roadmap that we've presented for them.
So speaking of fine points, what would be a couple of fine points you think, hey, Chris, if they focused in on these couple of finer points, you know what, that's the right place they should be focused?
Well, you can always, argue about, the right amount of money for any program or any initiative. And, if we proposed spending $20 million, for instance, for something, and they decide that 15 is a better number, I mean, that's a kind of a normal process for the legislature. Different from, taking a kind of a major policy question and going a different direction. I think this legislature is a good group of people. I've got confidence that they like most of what they have seen in our budget proposals, and I got some very nice comments today about the State of the State address. I think we're going to be on a good course this winter.
Governor, you and I both know property taxes is going to be a hot topic this legislative session. You've talked about your mill levy buy-down program, basically saying, hey, we're going to take roughly $700, $800 million to subsidize local property taxes. And you said today in your address, this is a reduction of taxation to North Dakotans. How is it a reduction of taxation to North Dakotans when you're simply taking state tax dollars and supplementing and subsidizing local tax dollars?
Well, Chris, I think you are missing the kind of the new feature of the K-12 education proposal. There will no longer be a mill levy buy-down program. That will be history. The state will assume a larger share of the cost of K-12 education, but the local share will be permanently held down. And that's a big difference from what we've had in the past. It will be true property tax reform, and I'm optimistic that people will see the value in that.
So help me understand it more, because I think a lot of people are saying, well, how does this work? Isn't it still essentially, though, just a money shift or a shell game of taking state tax dollars and giving it towards the school or the education funding or local property taxes?
Not really, Chris, because in the reform proposal that we have, we start with an amount of money that we think is the appropriate amount of money for education costs in total. Then that amount of money becomes the driver for how the formula works. And whatever is contributed locally actually just would reduce the requirement of the state. Conversely, if your district is not property wealthy, the state would pay a larger share. That's the way equity should work in school funding, and that is where you finally arrive at true property tax reform, where the local authority to place mills on taxpayers is controlled.
Governor Dalrymple, you know, one of the biggest challenges our state faces right now is lack of daycare providers. What's your solution for this challenge?
Well, we're proposing that we look at, some help with the facilities end of the question, which means space where private providers can operate and not have to pay an arm and a leg to get that space going. We're not proposing that we get involved in the operation of daycare in any way. This is basically operated by the private sector. But we do want to, make it possible for people to enter the business and find a place to locate and a place to launch their business.
Is there some proposal, bill on the table to have some sort of tax credit or tax situation to go back to parents so a parent can say, you know what, now finally due to some tax relief, I can spend more time at home with my kids and not have to send them to daycare?
Well, our approach would be to make it easier for the daycare provider to get into a good space situation, either with a permanent modular facility or with a remodeled space in their community. And if we can get the cost of the square footage for the space down low enough, then the rest of the enterprise, will work well. And it will be an incentive for providers to, take on more children.
So are you essentially saying that daycare providers are better at parenting kids than the own parents? Why not give the parents some sort of relief?
Well, we can't, dictate, Chris, really what young parents are choosing to do. They understand the decision about whether they do or do not seek out daycare. That's a private individual decision that everybody has to make on their own.
Governor, last question for you, probably the toughest one of the night. Do the NDSU Bison three-peat?
I don't see any reason why not. I saw several games this year, and I got to admit, it took me a while last year to kind of get to where I was a true believer, believer in how good that football team really is. And against Sam Houston State, I think we realized these guys are right up there. I'd like to see them take on Notre Dame. I think they could handle them.
Now you're talking. I think they could beat the Golden Domers. Obviously, a big game next year is going to be Kansas State, down in Kansas State. I'm sure you'll be there. And as always, Governor, thank you so much for your time. Great job today. I know we'll talk to you more throughout the legislative session. Stay with us. Coming up in just a moment, we've got a KFYR, a business political reporter, Bismarck political reporter will be joining us here in just a moment. Jessica Roos, and as always, please join our conversation. Go to our website, 630pov.com. Stay close, more coming up.